Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the EntreMusician, and so are you. And so is this wonderful sister who's sitting to the left of your screen. I'll tell you what, this is her third time on the EntreMusician. And you know why I keep inviting her on? Because she is awesome, because she is incredible, because I love and respect her so much. She is not only an incredible singer and songwriter, she's professor of vocal jazz at Kent State University, now turned author. This is Maria JACOBS. What's up, sister?
Jerry B, how are you, my friend?
Or you? You're on fire right now.
I'm grateful, thankful, blessed.
Grateful, thankful, blessed. Hey, I got the I Am Grateful bracelet on, which happens to be the title of your brand new book, but I want to talk about that. But before I do, I wanted to know, are you back to performing now? Are you back on point?
Yeah. Well, you know, throughout COVID, we were isolated, and I did what I do. I isolate myself as a writer. So I was blessed.
It was a good time to write.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't climbing the walls during COVID because I had this great gift that God gave me to spend my time with him. So I did a lot of writing, and I did a lot of releasing, and I started a podcast, and I started a blog, and I bolstered the gratefulauthor.com website. Right. And I did a lot of writing. So I was, we're really blessed. You remember what it was like in the 90s when we started off? There was nothing like this.
That's right.
We sat and prayed that we would get signed by a major record label. Now we pray that we don't.
There you go. That's absolutely right.
That's true. Excuse me. Well, I did do a couple live streaming concerts. Rock Wehrman, just brilliant piano player, wonderful human being. He had these live streaming concerts from his living room called Live from Rock Wehrman's Living Room. So I did two of those. Yeah. And then I did a Bop Stop live stream, total live stream. And now I'm doing a Bop Stop with a limited in-person audience and live stream. And that's July 22nd. That's going to be it. So.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, that's very cool. I mean, you have always maintained a very busy schedule. You've never exhibited any burnout, but you've been just clicking away from the time that I've met you.
Exhibited would be the operative word in that. I don't make my living and my money as an actor, but man, I have honed my skills. Excuse me, I still have a sinus.
That's quite all right. Absolutely all right. Well, tell me, what was the impetus? And I know a little bit about what the book is about. I don't want to do too much of a spoiler alert from the host side, but what was the motivation of you crafting this book? It wasn't just because you were in a pandemic and you were holed up. There was a reason why God inspired you to write this book.
And he did. And the manuscript was done in 2019. So no, that had nothing to do with the pandemic. I started writing 20 some years ago when I was kind of in a little bit of a pit in LA. I didn't have a place to live. I lost my job at the Hertz Corporation. I was in corporate travel. I was doing great. And then September 11th hit, and corporate travel just kind of
plummeted.
Yeah. And I just was doing wonderfully well there. And they let me go because mine was the biggest territory. And corporate just said, well, you got to get rid of her and break up her territory. So I lost my job. And that was just the beginning of a real downhill slide. That was in 2001. I didn't leave till 2009. And it was just a real delicate, difficult 8 years. Very tough. Anyway, I was at a crossroads. Do I go home or do I just stay here and white knuckle my way through? I should have gone home then. I didn't. And a dear friend, he and his wife invited me to live with them for 1 year, and got myself back on my feet. But anyway, while I was there, before I left, I just started writing. At that point, I didn't even want to go out and sing. I sat at the piano. I wrote my songs. I went to their computer. I sat, I made tea every morning and lit some candles, and I just sat there and I cried and I wrote my brains out, At that point, the book, I had no intention of releasing a book. I was writing cathartically. I was putting in front of me on paper everything that I had endured up until that point in my life, which was still, I mean, this bipolar disorder, I was diagnosed in my late adolescence. So I was like 19, 20, 21 when things began to come to a head. And that's what the whole book was about. Honestly, nobody would have read it. It was about as depressing as anything you could have read. It was all about the downside. So I put it down. I wrote about 50, 60 pages. And I put it down and I thought, well, what else do I write about? That's like everything I've lived through. And I just kind of came to the conclusion I really needed to live out the rest of this story if I was really going to tell something. Yeah. And so you fast forward now, I'm living in Cleveland. I'm very grateful. I'm out of LA after some difficult times that I expressed in the book, awful situations. And I was just driven to my knees, you know, and that's where God really found me. Not that he ever lost me. I think it was the other way around.
Understood.
So I had a supernatural experience, and it was amazing, and it was fearful, and it was like, well, what do I do with this? You know, and I could talk more about that. But for now, I just came home grateful, thanking God when I was happy, when I was sad, when I was irritated, when I was stressed. It was always, oh, this is so much better anyway. So thank you, God. Praise you. Thank you. And, you know, when you thank God, when the chips are down, that's when incredible miracles begin to happen. And everything went up, up, up in my life. Just truly. So I was teaching at Hoban High School in the 2016-17 school year. And I did really well there. And I got paid well. And I saved a bunch of money so that I didn't have to have a job in the summer. Instead, I went to Starbucks every day. I'd been cleaning out my office. I found that depressing manuscript. I found it on those little floppy disks, you know, those. Right.
And the little 3x5s.
Right. I found them on the 3x5s. And then I found the hard copy, obviously, and I read through it. And I'm like, you know, this really needs some sprucing up. So I said, let's just see what happens. And I went to Starbucks every day, drank way too much coffee, sat, and I wrote. I would spend 5-6 hours at Starbucks. I'd get there at like 10 in the morning, and I wouldn't leave until like 4 or 5. Wow. And I just sat there and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and the book became more, it just kind of began to write itself. Honestly, I mean, that was just the Holy Spirit telling me, you know what? Good for you. You waited, and now we really have something to talk about. So let's just tell people what I did for you. And that was my supernatural experience years prior. And I finally started to write about it, and I wrote about it in the book, which took some courage because, you know, I was in the thick of bipolar disorder. I had just been out of inpatient treatment the second time in 6 months. They did not get it right. I was not with my Cleveland Clinic doctors. It was not great care. Wow. And so the book became grateful because I was so grateful, because after what I had gone through, what God pulled me out of, you know, there's that expression that God will never give you what you can't handle. And but it's not 100% accurate. I mean, God will allow what you can't handle, because we are supposed to seek him to come in our weakness. What Corinthians verse is that, right? I will rejoice in my grace is sufficient, Paul said.
Yes.
That his grace is sufficient. Yeah. Therefore, I will rejoice in my infirmities, and because it is in my weakness where he is strong. I'm really paraphrasing. I haven't memorized.
No, but that's good. That's the word anyway. That's the word. Yeah.
I could not handle anything I was going through. I messed up everything. So, you know, at this moment where I was just, you know, paralyzed with fear and everything else, he just kind of came in and said, this is how this is going to go. I've watched you suffer now. Here's what I want you to do. But at the time it made no sense because I was not clear, and kind of filed it away in my tickler file. And the book just became a Christian memoir. It wasn't a Christian memoir before. The whole book now is just glorifying God, quoting scriptures that I do take to heart. You know, my goal is to read the whole Bible this year. I'm doing in those journals and things, but you know, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I know the scriptures that have helped me tremendously. Absolutely. So it's just a Christian book. It just glorifies God for what he did that I couldn't do for myself.
But I would venture to say, we're both men and women of faith. But I would venture to say, in the excerpts that I have read, and I haven't read the whole thing yet, but this book is not just for Christians. Especially in some of the struggles that you had with, bipolar and whatnot, and the ways that you interacted with your family and just going through those travails. This book will be encouragement for anyone.
That's the goal. Because you're right. It's not just for Christians to read. There's plenty in that book that I through long before I had my Christian renaissance, if you want to call it. So there's a lot in there that just details what I went through and how it manifested in my life. I kind of had a dual diagnosis. There was like psychosis. There was the movie Beautiful Mind. He was schizophrenic. So there were, it's, it is difficult to talk about because many people are going to chalk you up to just, well, that's crazy. Yeah. But I had a dual diagnosis that was, they called it schizoaffective disorder. It wasn't schizophrenia by definition, but it was very difficult to treat because bipolar is an affective mood disorder. It's severe mood swings. Mm-hmm. That's what manic depressive illness is. It does trigger thoughts that are not right, but to the degree with me, it kind of went off the bipolar charts into this other area where there was a lot of psychosis. I talked in my book about how, I used to drive around at night in Cleveland in like 1990, and I was convinced that there were people waiting for me somewhere. I had to go meet people, didn't know who they were, didn't know where they were. And I'm driving thinking, I have to go meet this network. It was just crazy. Wow. So I was driving through Cleveland on the freeway somewhere downtown, and I kept going east. That's all I remember. I don't remember where I was. And as I drove down the freeway, there was this baseball park and the lights were on. And I thought, oh, well, that must be where they want me to go. And I drove off the freeway and I went into the dark parking lot of this well-lit baseball park. And there were young people just standing around drinking, having their night party. Yeah. And I sat there with the talk radio station on like I was waiting for instructions. Wow. It was very Beautiful Mind, but that was 1990 and Beautiful Mind didn't come out until 2001 or something. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like I watched the movie and convinced. Sure. There was no filtering going on in my mind where that would have been anything I had recognized from media of any kind. Wow. So it kind of, I'd come home and tell these wild stories to my family. Well, they took my keys away and that wasn't a great situation, right? You can imagine how I reacted to literally being a prisoner in my own house. But I talk about it openly in my book because the people who spoke openly about it in their books, Kay Redfield Jamison and Patty Duke, I read, Kay wrote a book about, she was a psychiatrist and she was in med school when she had these major manic episodes. So she wrote this book called Manic Depressive Illness and the Artistic Temperament. It's called Touched with Fire. And she goes in detail, all these great artists, Berlioz, Lord Byron, Emily Dickinson. All these great artists, poets, musicians, and just details everything that they went through. Wow. And then she wrote a book called, what was it called? Memoir of Moods and Madness. I forget the big title. That's the byline. Anyway, that was documenting her life journey with bipolar disorder. And I read it cover to cover. And I read Call Me Anna by Patty Duke, who was very open about being bipolar. And she had a lot of difficult times. She used to show up to the set in Hollywood and literally trash it on a manic high. It was, I'm not laughing because it's funny, but it was just when people wrote in detail about what they went through. That was like me saying to myself, well, it validated what I went through. Yes. Because there's a big element of disbelief in the people you try to talk about. So reading these other stories, I went and I said to myself, oh man, I went through that. You mean that was real? Other people went through that? Oh my goodness. So it kind of gave me validation to start. Mm-hmm. And then years later, it gave me courage to be able to write about my stuff. And I thought, you know what? I've been in remission for years and things have gone great. I can't say everything has been a perfect walk, but my work, my relationships, my faith, none of those things have suffered. with these little, little chinks in the armor every now and then.
Sure.
So my most recent blog that I just published is called No One Said Remission Would Be Easy. So you can take that for what it's worth. But
That's cool.
yeah, I just thought, if people can read my book and they can see what faith did for me, that's great.
Yeah.
But if they see that I went through the things that they're probably going through, if you're going to pick up a book about bipolar disorder and who lived it, chances are you're doing that because you're going through it, or someone close to you who's going through it, and you just want to understand better. So,
Wow.
when not really wildly episodic and going through it, you want to tell people, you want to deal from your strength, and you want to say, listen, I got through this. I got tremendously through this. And Jesus was a major player in how I got through it.
Yeah.
If you haven't found Christ yet and you want to read my book, it's still going to be helpful to you, I think. Like
Absolutely.
you said, not just for a Christian walk,
No, absolutely. Now, the one thing that I was very curious about is how you were able to balance, if that's the correct word to use, your singing career and what was happening in your career artistically while you were battling bipolar. I mean, was it just all, were you able to compartmentalize, or what was that like?
No, I went out very sick. I was out singing in clubs at Ohio State University because I couldn't concentrate on my studies. I flunked spring quarter of, I think it was 1990. And it was just devastating. I flunked winter quarter, went home for spring quarter, and tried to get myself together. At that point, my family was in denial.
I see.
They didn't want to face that there was something very real going on. And the doctor, I had a psychologist at the time, and he was telling them, hey man, she's bipolar and she needs medication. And my parents would not have it. So I went about my life. I went to therapy, but I went out and I sang. The whole world was just a dark cloud. I never had a clear thought. And I'd go out and I'd sing, and, music is therapy. But sitting at the bar, even though I didn't drink at the time, I wasn't drinking, wasn't a drinker in my 20s. So sitting at the bar, having these thoughts of we'll just say a blanket word, we'll just say negativity, incoherent, not based in reality thoughts. Somebody looks at you sideways and you've got a 10-year backstory on what brought you to that point. And then I'd get up to sing and people would clap and I would be well received. It was addicting. That was my oasis. And I think I kind of worshiped the music more than I worshiped God at the time. The disease told me he wasn't listening. I couldn't feel the Holy Spirit. I cried through Mass, eventually cried through Protestant services that my church, that my music took me to. Yeah. It was just not a connection. And it's very painful when you sit in church and everyone's praying and feeling the Holy Spirit, and you're sitting there going, why don't I feel anything? This sucks. And I just stopped going to church, So I had to learn to love the giver more than the gift. That's where I am today, right?
That is so good. Now, tell me about your family then now that you have published a book, now that you have dealt, by God's grace with the recovery and the remission. How do they feel now? Was there some tears for your family to kind of walk through the chapters of the book?
There were tears. There are two occasions when I saw my father cry in my life. He's the most upbeat person I've ever met, never in a bad mood.
Yeah. When
his mother died, my grandmother, and when they came to the realization that I needed medication. The look on when my dad heard me talking and then started putting it together, what the doctors were saying and what he was hearing out of me, the look in his eyes and the tears in his eyes, that was almost as bad as what I was actually living through. So there were those tears. Now, are there tears of happiness? Well, when my dad sees that I'm very successful today and he thinks back to where I was, he gets a little choked up. But, my family was the one that went to the doctor. My brother, my sister, on different occasions, I was not able to listen to what a doctor was saying about what was going on with me. I was not able to process it. I'd have never known how to take medication, if I didn't have a family that was holding my hand through the whole process, literally doing it for me, what I could not do for myself. There is the grace of God. Amen. You know, I mean, how many people, 99.999% of the homeless people we see on the streets, they have some kind of mental illness. Yeah. They lost a job. They didn't have income saved, and they ended up homeless. Yeah. And there was probably a mental illness that kept them from being able to hold down their job. Yeah. So, you know, I was with the county for a while when I couldn't afford Cedars-Sinai Hospital anymore. Actually, I went to someone else in between, and she was like a training psychiatrist, not a psychiatrist, a therapist. And then I went to the county. I mean, I had the poorest treatment imaginable. And what I saw there, I mean, I was without family at the time. Yeah. But they were like, they didn't even have family 3,000 miles away like I did. You know, I mean, I just saw people go through things, you know, it was before I learned to be grateful, but I should have been very grateful because I saw people who like really had no one, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. We'll speak to this if you wouldn't mind. I mean, there are many musicians, many artists, many creative people, as you said, you know, just Patty Duke being one of them, one of many, but who are today either dealing with a mental illness, addicted to drugs or alcohol, having some other deep, dark disparity in their life. Yeah. And you knowing that, recording, having a career, touring, you know, how can you speak to the deepest need that they would have if they're watching or listening to this podcast today? What can you say to them?
I mean, I am a devout Christian. Mm-hmm. I'm a Catholic Christian who has been to many Protestant services where I just felt that's just a gift from God that he allowed me to see other forms of worship than Catholicism, which I always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So, and it's easy for me to sit here and say, it is true. I mean, it's very true. What Jesus did for me, he can do for you. You know what I mean? But for somebody who has never been raised with Christ, doesn't know Christ, maybe hears Christians talking in a way that's unloving, I would just say to them, you know, Jesus never said to follow my followers. You know, they were about as flawed, a hot mess, right, as anybody that you're going to find, right? Paul ripped people out of houses and murdered them before his conversion. Saul did. That's so correct. Look, man, if a cold-blooded murderer can find his way to Jesus and write, you know what, like 90% of the New Testament.
That's right. People
who don't know him, or people who follow people who maybe don't express his word correctly. Yeah. You know, if that's all you see, I would just invite you to kind of dig into some resources. Listen to people who really got it together. I mean, there were ministries that really helped me. I listened a lot to that Priscilla Shirer. You know what I mean? She's like my favorite Christian author and speaker. But how do we tell as Christians, how do we tell people who don't know him, never known him, never had a desire to know him, how do we tell them that he's the one that brought me out of this mess? How do we, apart from really learning, if you're really struggling, really learning about your disease, which you really need advocacy in your life to be able to do that. When I was in the throes of my disease, I couldn't do any of those things. I had to find some measure of a healthy, functional life before I went like rabid crazy, reading everything that I could about the disorder and about Christianity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my answer to everything right now at this point in my life is Jesus Christ. Yeah. It's just my answer to everything. It's
understood.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, how do you approach people who don't know him? We can't take a Bible at them, right? I mean, they have to have he's a program of attraction. You have to really want what Jesus Christ says.
Absolutely.
You know?
Well, I believe, you know, but the tool that I use the most is unconditional love. I mean, you know, you have to love a person where they are, you know, I mean, I was raised in a Christian home. I went to church. I think I might've been born in church. I don't know. My mom was just hardcore Christian, my grandparents and whatnot. But at 16, I walked away. And I didn't think the church was relevant to me and to what I was going through. And
Right.
if you look at my life on the graph from 16 to 28, I was just on an incredible sliding board. But this is
Wow.
not my story. We're coming back to you.
But I want to hear more about that. Yeah.
But the thing about it was during those 13 years, you know, it was people who showed me love that began
Right.
to draw me back. It wasn't people who were beating me on the head with the Bible. In fact, those who were beating me over the head with the Bible, I knew more Bible than they did because I was a
Yeah.
youth leader and all of that. So you can't tell me anything that I don't know. Shut up. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
they didn't know God's word because Jesus didn't beat anybody over the head.
Exactly right. But they were beating me pretty good. Now, my mom, she never beat me over the head. She prayed and
Yeah.
she was consistent with the fact that I know that the path you're on is not the one that the Lord wants you to be on. And
Right.
so, it, you know, I could tell my testimony at another point. This is actually our conversation
Yeah.
for you. But I really went down some paths that I shouldn't have, which included drugs, which included a lot of other incredibly evil things.
Yeah.
And that was God really getting my attention because the more that I was losing control, there was only one lifeline. And you're right. The lifeline was Jesus. I'm not tripping on that and the fact that, you know, Christian, I'm not that dude. I love
No.
Jesus Christ because he first loved me, and the people who loved me most were able to point me to him. And they could see me in my weakest, darkest, most sinister time and still show me love. I try to flip that and do the same to others.
That's beautiful. And that pretty much sums up what Jesus is about, you know. And I think people really feel that they have to go through something or do something or qualify. We all know that, you know, he will do the qualifying. He will call you, he will equip you for your spiritual battle, which we all fight. I mean, I've been in remission for years and I fight battles every day, you know. They're not all disease related. I'd love to say every problem I've ever had, every misstep, everything I've ever done wrong in my life. I'd love to say, oh, well, you know, that was all my disease. Much of it was, I will say, but you know, there was a lot of stuff I just was, you know, we're immature, young in life. We don't know what life is going to offer us. We don't know I didn't know how to handle anything in Los Angeles. I was from Brooklyn, Ohio. What did I know about that industry? You have to be a certain kind of character and person to pursue that business, much less make it in that business. And I don't think I was ever any of those things. I think I had a lot of talent, but I never quite fit in. And I worked with some really big players who could snap their fingers and put me on the map.
Right.
I could have done any, but they all kind of made it clear what they were looking for. And they, you know, kindly said, you don't have it. Nice voice. We really like your singing. Nice songs. Really good. Keep working at it. Not quite
today.
done. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe. And it's literally.
Say it again. I think I lost your audio. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I
didn't do it.
You just said.
I said, not now, honey, maybe in 20 years. And I think we're coming up on that mark.
Or maybe. So you can email them all back, right?
Hey, remember me? It's been 20 years. My watch says it's about my time now. That's
Absolutely.
Okay. I remember you in the first Entre interview that we did, you were kind of talking about how everybody plays follow the leader. You know, everybody kind of does the same things that we're told you need to do in the business. Now I have a distributor and I use Spotify and Apple Music and Google Play. I mean, I'm blessed to have a portal on all these digital platforms, and that's great. But, you know, I kind of have a head for what I want to do now. I have all these different platforms. I mean, I've been spending hours a day on my presentation. I have a YouTube channel for my book alone with Christian music, my podcast about my book. And that's called Grateful Book Author. You can also find it under Maria Eva Jacobs. But then I have my music channel that I started many years ago, and that's just under Maria Jacobs. That's my music. So they're linked, and my mariajacobs.com and my gratefulauthor.com, those are linked together. And now I have all these podcasts. There's like this great independent podcast platform where if you know what you want to say, if you know what your content is, they practically do it for you. Absolutely. You press the button and boom, they're all over Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all these other platforms I was unfamiliar with because the whole podcast thing is new to me. But, you know, little by little, I'm trying to tie together all of these independent platforms, and maybe they'll attract a bigger audience. Maybe they won't, but I'm doing speaking engagements now. I reached out to NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. The Ohio chapters are quite big. And, they're interested in the book and speaking engagements, which is great.
Yeah.
I have alopecia. I've worn wigs for years. So I reached out to the National Alopecia Foundation. And I'm just doing advocacy and looking for speaking engagements wherever I can go.
Yeah.
Signed up as an executive mentor for the Young Catholic Professionals Organization, Catholic Writers Guild. I mean, as a writer, as an author, which, by the way, I never asked God to make me an author or a college professor. So, there's proof that he'll give you more than you ask for,
That's absolutely right.
All that traditional, I want to be a famous singer stuff, he was just kind of locked all those doors. I mean, it just wasn't for me. He had some other way to go. And I'm not saying I don't hope my music gets heard on a larger level, but it's not, it does not appear to me at this point in my life that it's going to be by the traditional way,
That's really interesting that you say that, because, as you get a certain age and you're looking at the rear view mirror of your life and you're thinking what should have happened, because you've so invested so much time, resources, energy into this being the thing, because this is
money.
what I want to do, and money.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's really interesting that you have to continually redefine success from God's perspective, because what you think is successful is not what his plan was for you.
Amen.
And so I've had to do that. I've had to step back and go, okay, well, what are you doing? Well, I would love to do music 24/7. I hear about it. I know it happens. I collaborate with people, and that's all they do. God, how come you haven't allowed me to get on that on-ramp? Because why not? I could do it. That's where my heart is. And God, you know my heart. And he's saying, but my purpose for you is just like you said, my grace is sufficient for you.
Yeah.
Here's what I've called you to do. And once you take a step back and you go, okay, am I settled and surrendered to his lordship for me? And once that happens, then it clicks in. I don't have to. I just have to be who he's called me to be in this.
Yeah.
And it's been
but
great.
It takes tremendous faith and knowledge of his word. As I preface this by saying, I am not a biblical scholar. I mean, there's the way the Bible is written. I mean, the order of the books in the Bible is not the chronological order as to the way a lot of things happen, right? The book of Genesis kind of goes to the book of Job in a lot of, and there's all kinds of references. I mean, I'm learning how to read the Bible, but I mean, that's kind of a big feat. I don't know that you start at the beginning and just read all the way to the end. Things happen out of order and prophecies all over the place. I mean, I think we have to know him in our mind first, even before our heart, because to not know God's will and God's way is to step into, I mean, the enemy knows scripture backwards and forwards. He will baffle you if he can. So I just have learned that, we really have to know God in our mind. We have to really know his word, because people are going to come along with opportunities, not to throw them under the bus, but they're not all going to be right for you, not all going to be right for me. We have to be discerning as to, like you said, we have to just kind of go to God and say, well, this looks really great on the surface, but is this where you want me?
Exactly.
Is this where you have me pointing? And all systems point to the word no. That's correct. Making it paradigms that you see out there. Every time something finds me in some way, shape, or form, it just doesn't work out for one reason or another. I mean, those people, the really big players, I think they got to kind of dig your personality and what you're about before they even get to your music, because at that point, all the people they're dealing with are immensely talented. So why do really immensely talented people get turned away like by the thousands a day?
Right.
What are they looking for? They're looking for something in a person that they think people are going to connect with.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Boy, you hit it on the head so hard.
Did I?
Damn, just one. You just did it like that was it. You nailed it. Because I mean, you're absolutely right. It's not the talent. The talent is never enough. Your gift is not enough, but your gift will make room for you, provided you have the spirit and the heart and the authenticity to be who you're created to be. And that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
many of the things that I have worked hard to do and submitted for and auditioned for, what have you,
Yeah.
they've come to naught. But many of the things that just being Jerry, just walking through life, being who I am,
Mhm.
those things God have opened doors for me, opened windows for me, and found me things I didn't have to audition for. This
Right.
whole Entre
Right.
Musician podcast, and Tay Brown, we give him respect because he created an app on the Roku channel called VizD, invited me to it. The people
Wow.
here in my locale, the local channel, Armstrong Cable,
Yeah.
Northeast Ohio, Western PA,
Right.
they invited me. I wasn't looking for those avenues. So God has specifically for you what he
Yeah.
wants. And,
You
be
know,
open to him. You know what I
I had,
mean?
I had a cousin in the record business. You remember the Daz Band and the
I
Boku?
do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So my cousin was Joe Simone. He was actually married to my first cousin, Barbara Simone.
Mm-hmm.
He started off in the record business with Tommy LaPuma. He worked for Mike Curb out in LA. And he was the reason, I became friends and I worked with Steve Cox, and he just couldn't say enough about Joe. The reason they won a Grammy when they did was because Joe worked their record.
Wow.
He's the one that got them out of town.
Yeah.
So he was like my biggest advocate. He heard me sing in church, boom, brought me into the studio. He had North Coast Studios at the time, and had me make a demo as a teenager, of like 3 songs. And he was so encouraging. Yeah. And, he wasn't just with me. I mean, he had Herb Wilborn. He had a lot of wonderful artists in the Cleveland area that he was managing. He died suddenly, like literally. It was like an aneurysm in his heart or something.
Burst. Mm-hmm.
It was devastating for my family, but it was devastating for me because he was like the one person in my family who really encouraged. He was just convinced, you're not going to be one of the millions who never makes it, Maria. You got me. And he's like, but, don't go to LA. Boy, he was like, don't go to LA where you'll just be another number. Do not do it. You stay here, you hone your craft. And then here was the big takeaway that I did not believe. He said, if you're good, they will find you.
Man.
And I didn't believe it. And when he passed away, my career might have been completely different. And the careers of a lot of people in town who he was managing might have been completely different had he not passed. So, today I believe it. But today there are platforms for people to hear you. I didn't believe I'd be out singing in a club in Cleveland and somebody was just going to walk in and sign me right there. But, that was always the dream. Every gig I was ready for, I had this like delusion in my mind that maybe this could be the night. This could be the night, right?
The knight in shining armor on the white horse, he's coming to save you. Yeah.
Such an antiquated paradigm, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what you tell yourself. This is the gig that's going to do it. And and he has the record contract, or she has the record contract in her briefcase. She's walking into the club with it. You know what I mean? Pull out the ink pen. It's going to happen. How many times?
Yeah. Well, praise God that I never put my name on a contract.
Yeah.
Those are not all, excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Sure. You're fine.
Those are not all success stories.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I did have some experiences in LA. I was singing in a club, and the producer from Groove Addicts came in and said, I really need somebody who can improvise. They were doing those new wave beds, those 107.3 and 94.7 in LA. He goes, there's a lot of improv. They're all improvisation. You hear the music bed and you just sing, and I need people who can do that. Yeah. There's a good example. He brought me into a club, and the recording session went great, and he loved him and everybody loved him, but it was very oversaturated. And they had a lot of people, different people in the station brought their singers in. Mine never made it to air. You can hear them. They're on my channel. They're on my website. It was just an example of bad timing. The tape was great, and I got tape out of it, but never made it to air. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of near misses. While I was out there, I got heard, and I worked with people and I recorded with people. I guess the path that God wanted for me would involve him a lot more than that success route maybe would have brought him. Maybe wouldn't have brought him the glory that I would bring him to.
Yeah, no, I'm with it 100%. I identify with that. We were talking with a couple of EntreMusicians in previous conversations about this theory of rejection, and that, you know, musicians, artists, creatives are
Yeah.
so sensitive. We're
Yeah.
such a sensitive group that, you
Yeah.
know, if someone says, well, I can't use you for this project, or that song doesn't work, or you don't have the right sound, or whatever, we seem to take it more personally
Yeah.
than we should, than saying, okay, that was not the sound they were looking for. That's
Yeah.
fine. That project also is not for me, because if it was, I would be there.
Yeah.
We tend to internalize that, and we make it about us and not about the actual situation.
Yeah. Well, I think our egos are what makes us so sensitive. You know what I mean? To be told no means you got to have an ego in check so that you can just say, well, okay, so I wasn't right for that one. Now I catch myself when I talk to my college students. I have a lot of musical theater students in my jazz studio. Mm-hmm. And they're always coming in with these audition stories or these heartbreaks where they didn't make it. Some of them are in tears and teachable, teachable, telling them things that I need to tell myself. I'm telling them, you know what, if you're going to be in this business, you have to understand how saturated it is with brilliant artists. And you have to know that every no that you get is bringing you closer to the yes. That you need. There's no other way to look at it. Exactly. It's hard to tell me at 20 years old. It was hard to tell me at 20. And today, right? I think, you know.
No, you're absolutely right, because, wow, yeah, I could walk down that street. I wanted to ask you about your tenure at Kent State University, and that opened. How long have you been a professor there now?
Yeah, but it'd be nice if it was tenure, boy, I'll tell you that. I started teaching in fall of 2018.
2018, okay. I thought it had been about 4 years or so. It's just about that.
3 years, yeah. Next year will be my 4th year. And the studio has grown. It's grown from 5 half-hour students. I think I had 28 last spring, 25 or 26 last semester, 20 this semester. It's been consistently over 20 people. I've been able to carve out a niche and a living for myself with Kent State alone. But that's not the only thing I do. I also teach for Open Tone, which is a nonprofit organization run by Chris Anderson, and I'm an instructor for them. You know, I'm licensed. I have licensed K through 12, and they have me teaching at the Emmanuel Christian Academy in the mornings in Akron.
Oh, I see.
So I use my gen ed license in the morning, and I put on my college professor hat in the afternoon. And, you know, it's great. It's really nice. He puts out a lot of independent contractor platforms. He rolls a lot of things out. And I never dreamt I'd make half my income off of teaching for this nonprofit. So, I mean, God kept me. I mean, COVID was brutal. Yeah. Being a COVID teacher is a whole nother set of words. Got half people on virtual, half people in person. I mean, crazy. Yeah. My mom, it's public knowledge. She's doing a pretty rapid decline with dementia, and as one of her caretakers and as her child, it's a brutal situation.
Absolutely.
I left my husband. There were some tendencies there that were some unfortunate and very real triggers. That's all I'll say.
Sure.
So I left, and I was leaving a marriage, divorcing, getting annulled, moving, selling my house, moving alone. I mean, my gosh, they talk about the stress of moving alone, you know, it's living alone for the first time in 14 years. God kept me through all of it. But here I am, like at the end of all of this now. And I'm like, you know, that was a lot harder on me. You push through, you get into your push mode. I had 5 jobs and all of these things were going on. I really didn't have time for a meltdown. It was not on the charts. So now that things are slowing down a little bit, I'm just kind of feeling this. Whoa, man. I'm starting to feel what I went through all year long that I didn't stop to really process. No processing time. Sorry, don't have that luxury, you know?
Absolutely.
And now I'm kind of finding myself sitting there going, man, yeah, I catch myself in tears sometimes. And that's what prompted this blog to be, you know, no one said remission would be easy.
Yeah.
Nothing I've gone through in the last several months, which has been a little difficult. Yeah. None of it disrupted my work, my craft, my relationships, or my faith. So to that end, I am in remission. Does that mean I'm not struggling? Nope. No. I would love to tell people with bipolar disorder that remission means you're never going to have trouble a day in your life. Or as Christians who really give their life over to God, wouldn't you love to tell them that everything is going to be, roses and daisies for the rest of your life? No,
You'd be lying to them.
Right. Nice try. Good luck with that.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so grateful for our friendship, first of all. You're a true sister to me. And I don't know when we met. You keep telling me it was early 90s. I don't remember. It was
where we had lunch. Yeah.
In Cleveland. And it might have been a jazz fest. I don't recall, but I do recall this. I do recall there's not been an opportunity for us to talk where we don't always pick up where we left off. And it's just the most natural, organic vibe and relationship that I've ever had with anyone.
Such a blessing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
So grateful. Now, was there and remember, I'm going to ask Maria another question, but remember, if you are a subscriber to the EntreMusician, she's going to hang out with us after this conversation is done over at the backstage. And you can listen to that conversation because we go a little bit deeper than we do here. And we went deep here, but we go a little bit
I don't know if I'm I don't know if I can
what else is there? But all you have to do is log on at theentremusician.com, click on the backstage pass, register. There are 4 ways you can join us, either as a follower, a fan, a friend, or family member, and you get access to all of this material, resources, and even collaborations if you want access to that as well at theentremusician.com. But for now, to close this conversation, I always ask Maria, perhaps, and you've been on a couple times, so you may know the question that's coming. Since you and I have had these conversations, perhaps there was a question that you thought I was going to ask you, and I haven't asked, and you wanted to answer that unasked question. What would that be?
Well, I would love to just be a little more detailed about where you can find me out there as I tell my story, as I release my music. You can access everything about me through mariajacobs.com. Mm-hmm. Every link that you need on me is through mariajacobs.com. There's a portal that'll take you to gratefulauthor.com where you can read excerpts of the book, where you can hear the podcasts. The podcasts are available on Spotify and Apple Music, just to name a few. If you search Maria Eva Jacobs, you'll find my podcast. And I'm about to do my second one. First one is out there already. Excellent. So I guess I would just invite people to really seek out these podcasts and the websites, because I'm really putting myself out there, and I want to gather a community. I want to gather a community that's not just going to listen to my music, but also hear me be an advocate for some very difficult stuff. Wow. That's become a very big part of my platform. Something I don't want to let that go. Even for that singing career, I thought was the kind of singing career that I thought was everything. I really want this whole package to be an entire package. So, if someone rich and powerful says, hey, come on board with me, I like what you do, that's great. Yeah. I don't want to see any leg of what I'm doing right now chopped off for the other. It's very important to me. I'm kind of a package deal now. Mm-hmm. I'm not as one-sided as I was 20 years ago. So it's very important to me that people all that when they hear the name Maria Jacobs.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And you continue to grow. You continue to expand. Maybe the next time we talk to you, you'll have your second book out, or maybe you'll be writing the screenplay for the Maria Eva Jacobs story. You never know, right?
Tell you, the book is not published yet. It does rest with one of the top 10 Christian literary agents in the country, but it is not published yet. So these podcasts are like peeks into the book, and my blog peeks into the book, and the website peeks into the book. Hopefully enough people will get those little peeks, and then by the time it's published, they'll run out and buy it,
Absolutely. Well, the word you used that I like was building that community, because yes, there are, and sometimes when you're in the throes of a particular heartache, you think you're the only one, but there are other people who are struggling as well and need your story They need your testimony. They need your spirit so that they can engage with that, and that will help them. So thank you for being who you are. Thank you for the spirit that you have, the generosity. I mean, it's just been a blessing to me for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry.
Absolutely. Well, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am an entre musician. That's Maria Jacobs. She's definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, an entre musician. But you know what? So are you.
You.
Thank you for joining. We will see you again next time. God bless.
Right on.